To be quite honest with you, I think the waiter in general is probably one of the most underrated job there's out there. And we don't shed enough light on the skills and on the importance in a business. They're not just a vehicle to deliver food from chefs to guests, but they have a more active and vital role in the creation of the dining experience.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. In Australia, we've always had a problem with the idea of career waiters. Some use it as a means to earn money before moving on to other things, and the structure of restaurants mean they lend themselves to a huge casual workforce. But as our culinary landscape has evolved, there are many that have not only made an incredible career out of their front of house profession, but in doing so have aided the evolution of the restaurant industry too. Gianluca Esposto is the Assistant General Manager of Immerse in Sydney. Gianluca, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good. It's great to have you on the show. You've been a real feature of the front of house of some amazing restaurants in Sydney's culinary landscape. Tell us a bit about Immerse and the front of house offering there.
First of all, thanks for having me, mate. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Immerse, it's one of the most, it's probably the most kind of glamorous Italian fine dining restaurant in Sydney at the moment. It's all based basically around, tableside service through the use of, garridons and trolleys, and we do pretty much everything. We try to do as much as we possibly can at the table. From fresh pesto, from filleting fish, from dressing a burrata, from serving ice creams, and all the little things. And that's what it's a very kind of common service back in Italy or Europe, but it's very hard to find, if it's not impossible to find here in Australia. So that's what we base our service, our restaurants around. Yeah.
What's it been like training the front of house staff to go into the realm of the kitchen as such and working with the kitchen to get that offering right of making pesto at the table, filleting fish?
Obviously, it's been very challenging, especially at the beginning, because not many staff members were trained to do this kind of to provide this kind of service. But I think it's very rewarding to see how the people our guests have embraced this sort of service, and they all love the theatre and the atmosphere and the sort of warm kind of hospitality that we bring to every single table pretty much every day. So it's been great. It's been received very well from our guests, so we're extremely happy.
You originally come from Italy. Take us back to when you were young. What region of Italy are you from, and what was food like?
So I was born down in south of Italy, in a small town called Monopoli, which is 40 km south of the main city, which is Bari, in the Puglia region. One of the most probably beautiful part of Italy. And then I moved to Milan when I was 7 or 8 years old with the family. I went to school there, obviously, and then by the age of, I think, 16, 17, I started to get my first job. That's where pretty much everything started. At the time, I was it was a sort of a after-school job, but then I quickly realized that I prefer working over studying. So after not long, I quit the school and start working as a full-timer, basically. So I started in a small cafe. Obviously, I had no idea absolutely about what I was doing, no experience, but I was very excited to start earning, my first salary to get my money, basically, and walking towards that sort of financial independence from your family. So, yeah.
Tell us about that cafe. How different small cafes in Milan compared to what we see here?
Well, to be honest, not very different. it was basically a small place where we used to serve obviously breakfast from croissants and making coffees, and then going towards lunchtime we used to serve aperitivo, which is a very common sort of ritual, if you can call it that way, back in Italy. At the beginning, when I first started, obviously I was just delivering food and drinks to tables, because obviously I had no skills, I had no knowledge, no experience whatsoever. And then, funny enough, one day, the guy that I was working with at the time called in sick. So my boss asked me if I was, willing to learn more about the job and learning new skills, like, making coffees or start preparing basic drinks. And obviously I said straight away yes to it. And then that's when I started working as a bartender. But obviously working in a small cafe in Australia or in Europe or in general everywhere, I think means on a small business in general means be able to do pretty much everything from ordering to waiting to cash ups to all the aspect of the business, and that's what I started doing pretty much.
There was a time when you left the industry briefly at a young age. Tell us about that and what drew you back to hospitality.
Well, to be honest with you, relationship. I left the hospitality because my girlfriend at the time had, her parents had this sort of jewellery company back in Milan, and that was a sort of a safe job. That 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I used to travel quite a lot from everywhere, pretty much in all of Italy, visiting suppliers or participating to conventions or shows or things like that. But then I was quite bored with it, to be honest, and I needed to get back to what I loved, which is obviously hospitalities. And I guess to me, hospitality, but I guess pretty much to everyone, it's mostly about relationship. As humans, the relationship that we form with other people are critical to our emotional well-being, I guess. We have this kind of constant desire to be close to other people, and obviously there's no better way to me by through customer care, and obviously which is a sort of the process of creating relationship with customers and guests. So and it's also about creating I guess memories for your guests, and that's to me that's the most rewarding part of our job. Yeah.
You ended up coming to Australia. Tell us about that decision and what triggered it and what it was like for you coming to Australia for the first time.
So I think to be honest with you, I think was the part that changed my career, but also my life. I was 21 or 22, if I remember right. When I first arrived to Sydney, I obviously had zero knowledge of the language. I didn't know anybody. I have no connections at all. I didn't know what I was doing, basically. So yeah, I think I was at the beginning. I was tossing up between Sydney and London. But then what made me decide to come to Australia was the fact that it was that it's basically as far as possible from home. So my only option basically was to succeed in my experience. So I had to roll up my sleeve basically and get it done because I didn't have any support. So instead, being close to home, like UK or whatever other country, it was it would have been too easy probably. So that's what made me come on the other side of the world. As I said, I came to Australia when I was 21, 22, straight to Sydney. I stayed here. The original plan was to stay for 6 months, 1 year. Which was basically the duration of the working holiday visa at the time. Learn the language, make some friends, do a great experience and learn as much as I could about new culture. But then obviously as soon as I arrived from day one, I realized that was not going to work. I mean, I fell in love with the city straight away. So, the 6 months plan was gone basically.
What surprised you about Sydney when you first arrived?
I think it was. It is very different from the culture that you see in Europe. And as I said, to me, the most exciting part was that I was so far from home that no matter what I was doing, no matter what I decided to do, I know that I had to get it done because I didn't have the choice or the support that I would have loved to have when you first, when you do an experience like this. But also, I simply love it, the freedom and the people that, waving to you on the street saying, trying to help you out as much as they can, or just in general, the culture. People are very friendly, very easygoing kind of life. And that's what I love the most about Sydney in the first few days.
You've worked at some quite a few restaurants in Sydney, but what was the first port of call for you, and how important was that with you getting your roots in Australia?
Fun enough, the first restaurant that I wanted to work with as soon as I arrived in Sydney was Aria. And obviously at the time, as soon as I arrived, I didn't have that much experience. I didn't have the right skills and knowledge to join a place like that. So basically, I worked all my way up by starting in a little Italian pizzeria in Lane Cove. And then obviously, as I said, I worked my way up. I worked there for 3 years, 2.5 or so. But I decided, obviously, I felt like I needed more at the time. So I left this little place, and then I went straight to Catalina in Rose Bay, which was a very great experience for me because that's where I met Michael McMahon. And that is, I think it's been one of the mentors in shaping my career, my knowledge, and my sort of mindset about the hospitality as well. So, yeah.
Do you have any memories of working at Catalina and the impact that it had on you?
Well, it was, first of all, it was a great location because, looking at the harbour down in Rose Bay, beautiful place, beautiful restaurant, classic food, and high expectations, obviously, especially coming from, the kind of clientele that you have around the restaurant. I love pretty much everything about it, to be honest. At the beginning, it was a bit challenging because I was still trying to find my way. But then, as I said, I had great mentor in Michael McMahon and Judy as well. Michael sadly passed away not long ago. Both of them, the whole family actually helped me quite a lot. And it's been great. Yeah, I have a great memory about that experience.
A lot of international workers have problems with visas and changing jobs and staying in Australia. What was your situation like in those days around Catalina?
Well, as everybody else, as you just mentioned, I was going through, the whole visa process to try and find a way for myself and my partner to get to the permanent residency that allows you, to work freely, not being locked to anybody really. It's been challenging. It's been tough. It's been frustrating, and it's been hard because it's a long process. It is very hard because you don't have all the answers that you like to have. It's a long process. There's no clarity around, to be honest. As of today, I'm still, fighting. I'm still, almost to the finishing line to get to my PR. So,
wow.
Yeah, after 9 years. So it's a very long process.
Well, although Aria was the first port of call when you got here, you ended up joining Matt Moran's Aria restaurant. Tell us about how that came about and what it was like there.
So it's a funny story because straight after Catalina, I felt like almost burned out by the whole visa situation. So with my partner, we basically decided to, sort of give up and go back to Europe, to Italy, or find a better, a new experience. And that's what we did, basically. We went to Europe for just a holiday, but we were ready, basically, to, pack everything up and leave Australia for good. So then 2 days after, I received a call by the immigration saying that my visa had been approved. So I had the chance to stay in Australia for another 4 years. So that's when we came back to Australia, and I start, sending my resume pretty much on the most, the most important restaurants in Sydney, such Aria, Benelong, and many others. I had a call from the then GM from Aria that wanted me to get in from for an interview, which we did. I actually had an interview with the then restaurant manager. It was great, great interview. The interview went well, but he said, unfortunately, I don't have a full-time job available for you at the moment. I can only offer you, a couple of shifts. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I can't do much with the shift. I'm planning my future. I'm planning my life here, so I need a full-time job. So then just I walked away at that time. A week after, the GM called me in. Because I had spoken to people about me, he read my resume, and they really wanted to give me the chance. They really wanted to get me into the business, and that's what he did basically. So he got me in, even if there was not real needed at the time for an extra staff, and that's what I started working as a section waiter back in the day, then basically I worked on my way up. After 6 months, 7 months. I got promoted as a restaurant supervisor, and then after another 6 months, I got promoted as assistant manager. So I had to thank this GM that had pretty vision. That had this vision on my skills and my potential, and that was probably one of the moment that changed, I guess, my career.
Aria is in an iconic location, renowned Australian restaurant. There's been many events and amazing dinners there. Is there any that stand out for you in your time that you were there?
Oh, hands down, the 20th anniversary was the most important one. Great achievement, obviously, for the business, for Aria, for Matt, and for everybody involved, especially the people behind the scene. So I remember being all this excitement and getting this special dinner ready, and making sure that everything was spotless. I remember, we invited all the most important chefs from the country, from Sydney, from all over Australia, as well as media. So there was a lot of tension on that night. I can guarantee you that. But it was a very successful night, a very great night, and everybody had a great time, and there was a great celebration. And it's one of that memory that will stay, with me for a very long time. Yeah.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking to add a slightly firmer texture, so there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
You mentioned the tension of delivering the experience on a night like that, but what's it like for the front of house staff when you, at that level of, a couple of hats, people are spending a lot of money, there's a lot of expectation, you may have restaurant critics in the room. How do you manage delivering that service and the pressures involved?
Obviously, pressure plays a big role in the sort of events. I think you shouldn't be changing what you normally do on a daily basis, because at the end of the day, even if you have reviewers or chefs or whoever it might be, they're still a human being, right? So your dining experience shouldn't be changing. And I guess one of the most important part, obviously, in delivering the perfect dining experience to me is also reading the guest, which is, as I said, probably the most important aspect. Everyone has obviously, different tastes and expectations. So the better you are at picking up through, simple questions that can help you understand what mood they're in, if it's a special occasion or, if they're well educated in terms of food and wine knowledge or whatever it might be. And the better equipped you are in dealing with this different situation and exceed their expectation. But to me, it also comes down to being genuine and friendly and warm with your guests, almost like you're welcoming, someone from your family or your best friends into your house. That's the feeling and the message that we try to pass on to the team pretty much every day. That's perfect dining experience to me.
The last year and a half has been challenging for many. What sort of impact has that had on you and your career?
It's been awkward, to be honest. I've never experienced anything like this, especially when we talking about COVID, when everything started back in, I think it was in March here in Australia. Very awkward and sad feelings. It happened so quickly. I remember start reading about whatever was happening overseas, especially in Europe, in Italy. Talking pretty much every day with my parents back in Milan. I felt useless at the time, which is a very, not a great feeling, and powerless, because there was nothing you could have done at the time, whatever was happening back home. And but at the same time, I'm also, strange to say, but also felt this sense of safeness, knowing that we were on the other side of the world, on an island, far from everyone. And I think this was just my sort of subconscious not wanting to process the reality. And then obviously when the government announced the first lockdown, I remember we were, packing up the whole restaurant. I was obviously at Ari at the time with the team, moving crockeries, glasswares, wines, and sitting in the main dining room, staring at an empty opera house, feeling completely empty. There was literally nobody out there, and on what it's normally the busiest, part of the city, with tourists and cruise ships and everything else. So, it was definitely one of the probably saddest day of my life, I would say. Yeah.
Matt Moran is a renowned chef and restaurateur with award-winning restaurants all over the country. But what's he actually like to work with?
He's amazing. He tries to be obviously around as much as he can. It's not obviously easy for him having, as you said, different restaurants, different business, different things, on a personal level as well to look after. But he's great. He's always there for you, no matter what you needed. He's always there to show his support, to show your appreciation for what you're doing. For his business. I remember one of that day when we were packing up for just after the government announced the first lockdown. He came into the restaurant, he gave us a big hug and said, "Guys, I'm here. If you need me, you got my number. You call me for anything at any time." So that's exactly what you're looking for in your employee. So he's a great guy, amazing chef and amazing restaurateur.
By the time you decided to leave Aria, you were in the role of GM. What triggered the move to leave and join Amare?
Well, basically, I'm the kind of guy that always looks ahead on what's next. I'm always asking myself, what's next? What's the next step? What's the next big challenge for your career? And I remember, covering that GM position back at Aria, but again, looking ahead, there was not much improvement or not much growth for me within the business. Well, basically, the next step would have been, being a sort of an operational manager that would have to look after, pubs and another restaurant. But I wanted to be in the fine dining side of the hospitality. And that's what made me decide, to join Alessandro and Anna at the Mare, basically. So yeah.
Well, Alessandro Pavoni is also a renowned chef with some incredible restaurants, and including the new one, Amare. He's also Italian. What's he like to deal with?
So I absolutely love working with Alessandro and Anna, his wife. I think together, they're one of probably the most incredible couples that our industry has to offer. The perfect duo kind of thing. Anna basically runs the back of a house operation, which literally includes everything from payroll, visas, menus, events. She's a machine, never stops. And Alessandro is obviously the creative mind behind the business, always thinking and looking ahead at new dishes, new ideas, and motivating you and pushing you to kind of be the best version of yourself every day. They make everybody feel part of this huge family. Which as of today, I think counts 4 different menus. They're literally an inspiration. So it's great to work for them.
Do you have any stories of what it's like to work with this dynamic duo?
Basically, it's funny. I mentioned earlier, he's the kind of guy that always pushes you to do more, to be the best version of yourself. And that our restaurant, it's basically all based around tableside service through garrisons and trolleys and everything tableside. So one day we've decided to come up with these words or tags for our guests, which is the Italian job, That basically means trying to do as much as possible tableside, including dishes that are not on the menu, but dishes that Alessandro wants to serve to a specific guest, right? Like, you would do carbonara tableside. Some nights you would do cacio e pepe tableside. Some other nights you would do pasta alla gricia tableside, or pesce al sale. All these little things done tableside. The funny part is that you don't know where these dishes will come into play, because Alessandro obviously decides right there during service what we should be serving to our guests. And there's this sort of competition or challenge of him wanting to put you in the almost in the weeds during service. Obviously, it's his way of pushing you to improve the dining experience and to offer that kind of wow factor to our guests. And on the other side is us wanting to succeed, and serve the particular dish to our guests, and prove him wrong, obviously. So he's kind of giving up now, because most of the time we anticipate his thoughts or ideas, and do dishes ourselves without him saying anything to us anymore. So we had a lot of fun, yeah.
The influence of Italy on our culinary landscape, whether it's coffee or pasta or just the way that we share food, is undoubted. But how different are Italian restaurants here compared to back home?
Well, I don't think they're very different, to be honest. Nowadays in Australia, you can find amazing Italian food, like literally great food. Thinking about, Ormeggio, or Pilu, or Lumi. There's great Italian restaurants in Sydney and all over Australia. And I don't think we're far off, to be honest, far behind Italy. And obviously it's a little bit different because you have a mix of so many different cultures here in Australia. So you might not have the classic traditional kind of Italian food, but you have the twist with that comes from other culture as well. So I think we are on the right path, to be honest. And I think the Australian hospitality and the Australian dining scene has a bright future ahead.
You mentioned the style of service that you're doing is very common back in Italy, but not so much in Australia. How have guests responded to some of the theatre of service at Amare?
Oh, they're absolutely in love with it. The more you do, and the more the more they want to see. As I said, we start with basic stuff like cutting up and dressing up the burrata at the table, or the pesto dish. Obviously, it's been one of the most popular that we currently have on the menu. So basically, we do we make fresh pesto tableside on a big marble mortar that comes from Carrara in Italy, by using fresh ingredients, and the guests just absolutely loving it. Some guests, they come back into the restaurant just to have the pasta dish, just because they love the kind of theater, the kind of atmosphere that we create within the restaurants. So it's I think it's challenging for us, especially because we turn quite a few big numbers at the restaurant, and that's where the challenge is, to try and keep up, keep the standards and the quality up there, by also turning big numbers. So yeah.
You're proof of someone making a real career of the front of house. Are you seeing more of a move towards people making front of house chosen career?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I think the waiter in general is probably one of the most underrated job there's out there. And we don't shed enough light on the skills and on the importance in a business. Nowadays, our concept proves it. They're not just a vehicle to deliver food from chefs to guests, but they have a more active and vital role in the creation of the dining experience. But at the same time, there are not many programs or awards around the front of a house side of the hospitality. It's all mostly based around chefs and sommeliers, which has started to become a bigger thing throughout the years. And actually, probably the only one that is giving all these people voice and space and the chance to shine and be rewarded is Appetite for Excellence. We kind of live and breathe hospitality, so you love what you do, you're passionate about your job. It's quite natural to wanting to learn more through our mentors that can guide you during your career. I think front of a house staff represent a 50% obviously of any hospitality business, but for some reasons they're not recognized in the same way chefs are, for instance. I'm a bit of a dreamer in general, and this is one of the things that I'd really like to change within the industry, which is the perceptions and the importance around this role, and trying to give them a voice and the confidence that they need to be able to see this job as a career job and not just a temporary, kind of thing while you're studying or you're trying to figure out what you do with your life. For example, I don't know, by organizing, coming up with, meetings or creating a sort of a community of, managers and waiters or waitresses or whatever it might be, and developing a sort of a program or school where everybody can share their, knowledge, whether it is a financial aspect of the business or marketing side of it. Or a more practical one, like learn how to fill fish at the table or making a pesto at the table or whatever it might be. So this is my kind of short-term goal, and maybe you could help me with that.
Well, what's your advice for people in the industry that may be casual at the moment, considering a career as in front of house? What advice would you give them?
Find a mentor. It's probably one of the most important part of our job. Mentor is what helps you in shaping you or who you will become in the future. And obviously passion, it's the other key ingredient. If you don't love and if you don't like and love what you do, there's no way you will be great at it. So I live and breathe hospitality. It's the first thing, that I think of when I wake up, and the last one when I go to bed. Always trying to stay up to date with all the news regarding our industry, or reading magazines, or following wine courses, or trying to learn more about the specific ingredients or how that specific ingredient is grown. All the little things like that. So I think passion, it's definitely the key.
You mentioned how multifaceted the career of a waiter is. Do you have any tips for turning a potentially difficult situation with a customer into a good experience for everyone?
Well, as I said, reading the guests, to me, it's the most important. It's the most important part. You don't know what their life is. Basically, you don't know what they might have had a bad day. They might have had a fight with the partner. They might have had a bad day at work. So it's extremely important that we put ourselves in their shoes, and trying to exceed their expectation. Trying to making sure that they feel looked after. That they feel they leave your place happy. At the end of the day, they might be saving some for quite a long time to get to your restaurant. So that's one of the things that we never have to forget, especially during the current environment. It's extremely important to remember that. Just be genuine. Just be happy to make them happy. Just be yourself and be proud of what you do. That's, I guess, my biggest advice. Yeah.
You left Aria for the change and a new challenge with Amare, and it's got some incredible front of house service and very different for Italian restaurants at the moment in Australia. What is it that you love about what you do?
As I said, the interaction with my guests is the most rewarding part. I think seeing the smile in their faces once you've once they finish their meal and once they about to pay the bill, they're living happy. They're living satisfied. That means you've done your job at the best you possibly can. But also, to me, what hospitality, it's also a business of people, and as I said earlier, it's about creating memories for them, and sometimes we kind of forget that. You really pay what you really pay in a restaurant. What you really pay for in a restaurant, it's people's time as well, and understand that people are the most important aspect of the business, or any business, especially hospitality, above food, wine, or anything else. So extremely important that I think, as a guest or as a staff as well, we look after them. They feel cared for. They feel valued for. That's the only way. That's obviously it's going to reflect on the guests as well, and they will do a great job and they will stick around, and they'll be happy to work with you or to having a dinner with you. So yeah.
Well, having experienced your amazing hospitality, hats off to you and your career and everything that you do. Gianluca, we've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.